Welcome to G5 Classified, your one-stop shop for all things Group of 5 college football. Stepping up to the microphone are your hosts, Gabe Kuhn and Kyron Samuels. Now, let's talk some G5 football.
We're off and rolling live. Episode 8 of the G5 Classified podcast is here. Gabe Kuhn alongside Kyron Samuels. You're listening to this on October 17th. It's a Thursday, but we're coming off of week 7 of college football, and I got to be honest, Kai, here's Ryan Day losing big games yet again, brother. Oregon hangs on and Autzen 32-31. We've become used to this over the years with Ryan Day.
Yeah, and I think it's one thing to put into context. Like, Oregon's a really good football team. Alton's a very difficult place to play. But come on, man, it's the same story over and over and over again. And it's almost like you're finding. I believe it's our boy Colton did in Dubsco. He has like a checklist. It's like special teams mistake, check.
Yep.
Offensive non-adjustment, check. It's like there's a checklist that you go through every time, and they're checking the box every time in one of these big games. So it's a difficult situation, and kind of like the national hoping for Ryan Day, it's kind of been weird for me to see. It's like you got guys saying, "Oh, he's still right around the corner," or Kirby. Why are we putting Kirby in Ryan Day in their situations in the same box? To me, it's just it's not comparable. You got to hold the guy accountable. Maybe this is the year he still gets over the humps. 12-team playoff. They could meet again, in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game. But right now, there's not a reason to me why this team, as talented as they are, top to bottom, should be sitting at 5-1 and not undefeated.
Now, I want to hammer away at Ryan Day in just a moment, but I will say Oregon played a really clean game, man. And they stole possessions when they needed to. The onside kick, like everybody's been hoping, like that. I've always asked that question. It's like we want to do the end over end, pop it up in the air all the time. Why don't we just nail somebody in the front row as hard as we possibly can? If your kicker can aim it well enough, feels like that's the most efficient way to go get a onside kick. But Dan Lanning coached aggressive as hell. He had his Bill Belichick, Mike Vrabel bag out at the end of the game with the 10 seconds left, puts a 12th man on the field, gets the 5-yard penalty, runs off 4 seconds. He's made it literally took days to go change that rule I think what this does show me, though, this Oregon win, is Dan Lanning's here to stay, man. And I think at some point he's going to be a national championship winning coach. I don't know if that's going to be this year, but this is a hell of a way to start. And what you asked me what I think about the rule change, because now you will have the decision if somebody runs a 12th man on the field in the last 2 minutes of each half. This is what the NCAA said. You will be able to take the 5-yard penalty and have your seconds come back. You can get your time back. I think it's fine. I've always been of the opinion. I don't think a purposeful penalty should lead to you as the penalized team getting an advantage over another. So I'm fine with it. I think it's okay. And we can be reactionary about these things. I remember Mike Vrabel in the NFL with he ran off a minute 39 seconds in the divisional round in 2019 against the Patriots when he was coaching the Titans. He ran off a minute 39 seconds, got under 5 minutes because he just kept taking, delay a game. They ended up changing that rule as well. So I think these are the times you can be reactionary because I don't think a penalized team should get an advantage because they are penalized.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I just think if this happened at Boise State, Oregon State game, will we be talking about it? I think the fact that it was on a national stage, a team like Ohio State was affected by it.
Ohio State's on the other side. That's probably a big reason.
And Lanning was so matter of fact with it in the press conference on Monday. They asked him. He basically was like, "Yeah, it's something that we practice." I think that's what's forcing the rule. But like I said, if this was Oregon State versus Boise State, I don't think anybody would be sitting here crying about the rules. So maybe it had a little bit to do with who it happened to and where it happened, but. Like you said, at the end of the day, it probably is a good change overall, so I can't be too mad at it.
Yeah, but Dylan Gabriel played a clean ball game, 23 for 34, 341, 2 TDs. That was his game of the year so far. This is something for me that I think they can carry throughout the rest of the year. They finally started pushing the ball downfield a little bit. It wasn't the dink and dunk Will Stein style that he played with Bo Nix. They finally pushed the ball downfield a little bit more, and you saw a lot of those skill position players better because of it. Tez Johnson had a good game. Evan Stewart, who I talked about all last week, where has he been all year? He had 7 catches, 149 yards and a TD. So as much as we're going to talk about Ryan Day pretty heavily, I do want to tip the cap to Dan Lanning in Oregon because that was a good, well thought out program win, offense, defense, special teams.
100%. And I got to give a big shout out to that offensive line because I was pretty critical of them early on because, I mean, the first 3 games of the season, they had given up more sacks in those 3 games than they had given up the last 2 seasons combined. And then the last 4 games, they haven't given up a single sack. They shut down those Ohio State edge rushers, did a great job against the pressure looks. So I got to give them a ton of credit. And shout out to those guys. Shout out to my guy, Terrence Ferguson, man. He's like low-key the straw that stirs the drink. Like, he's such a mismatch, and they have to respect him defensively. And he kind of opens up stuff for them. And I think you'll continue to see that more where they stretch the field because you can't leave a guy like Ferguson unaccounted for in the middle. So great offensive game plan. They kind of changed it up a little bit. We're more aggressive. And shout out to the offensive line. Finally playing like they're supposed to.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with that Ohio State defensive line. Jack Sawyer didn't do shit. That man was he had been hooping through 5 games into a damn thing. It just didn't make sense. I was talking to our guy Dubsco, our guy Colton. He said there's a disagreement between Jim Knowles and the defensive line coach, and maybe there's sort of a little bit of a butting heads there, and that's why you see in big games them disappear to a certain extent. So I don't know, but this all comes down to Ryan Day, and we have to have this conversation because here are the stats in big games for him. He's 2-4 in bowl games. He is 1-3 versus Michigan. He's 2-6 versus AP top 5 teams, and he's 0-3 versus the SEC in his career through 6 years. And you can look at those stats and you can say, well, he clearly crumbles in the big moment. But at the same time, it's not any one thing that I look at when it comes to Ryan Day coming up short in these matchups and the reason he hasn't won a national championship. I think it's just always situational football with him and aggression and being able to find the minutia and work through the minutia of the game. I remember in 2022 in that Georgia game, they're down 42-41. He has a chance to go win the game with a field goal. He has a 27-yard run ripped off by C.J. Stroud. Then they get early down. They're on the 31. He doesn't want to be aggressive on first down, even though that's the perfect time to be aggressive. Runs it with Dallin Hayden for a loss of 1 yard, gets himself behind the chains, then throws 2 passes in a row that were both incomplete. So you settle for a 50-yard field goal with 8 seconds to go. And your kicker and your special teams weren't worth a damn that year. So you lose that game. And in this game, wasn't ready for the surprise onside. And I think Dan Lanning had situations all mapped out by the end of the game way better than he did. And I know that we can look at Will Howard and blame him completely for the final play of the game. But also, it's hard for me not to look at a head coach when you have a 5th-year player making a decision like that. That should be ironed out in practice. Nothing like that should ever happen where you have 6 seconds left on the clock. He runs not even for a first down, slides down with 0 seconds left. It was embarrassing.
100%. Like you just said, to me, like, you can blame Will Howard, and I'm 100% because I said it with Alabama fans, and they're all, bitching and complaining about scheme. But I'm like, a lot of these, it's just players not making plays. Will Howard, as a 5th-year guy, should 100% have better, wherewithal than that. But like you said, that's something that they probably should have ripped a million times in practice, in-game situations. It's something that on every team I played on going back to high school, we rep those in-game situations. It's something that you do every week. So the fact that he wasn't prepared for a moment like that, then you can't really blame the crowd noise or you can't really blame anything else. I mean, from my vantage point, Will Howard played a damn good football game, maybe the best football game I had ever seen him play up until that point. But it was the last drive that he made some untimely mistakes, and it seemed like he just wasn't prepared for that moment. So to me, that falls back on a quarterback guru. He's supposed to be a guy that develops these quarterbacks and get them ready to play. So that falls right back on the head coach to me.
Yeah, but I got to be honest with you. I see there's probably a lot of people, especially in Ohio State circles, that are out on Ryan Day. I'm not out on Ryan Day, brother. I'm sorry. I can't be. He's 61-9. I know that you expect more, and you should have probably gone and won a national championship with the talent that you've had. But I think it's very clear. There's a couple of things that are very clear to me. One, Ryan Day took over this job. It was his first head coaching job. He's 6 years in. So the Urban Meyer excuse of, he took over this great program and all of Urban Meyer's guys, that's worn out. There's still a really good team with a really good roster. He recruits at the highest level of college football still. And he's not losing like 4 or 5 games a year. He's still losing 1 or 2 in crucial moments. I understand he's losing them and you want to see him win eventually. But most of those games, his 9 losses, 6 of them are against AP top 25 team or AP top 5 teams. And then the rest of them are AP top 15 teams. So it's like he loses games against teams that don't lose very often. Again, I understand you're supposed to get over top, but eventually I just have the sense that he will. I feel like he will. And obviously you can't prove that until he actually does it, until he actually has a national championship trophy in his hands. But I still believe that he can get it going because he has this program rolling by himself, right? Obviously he's got, a great coaching staff. You have Brian Hartline as a wide receiver coach who brings in great wide receiver recruits every year, and that's what you built your program on. You have Jim Knowles handling the defensive side of the ball. But I think when it comes down to a program CEO and, having his handprints all over this program for better or for worse, he still is upholding a certain standard that I didn't think, a couple of years ago, after all the Urban Meyers guys were gone, that he'd be able to uphold. He's still doing it. And the other part of this that I do kind of hold is he has made some adjustments along the way, right? He has seen the shortcomings and the conversations that are had around his program, and he's made some meaningful changes at least the last couple of years. First 4 years, it's an offensive team. You got to light up, score 55. They have no edge about them. Their run game isn't that great. Their defense is really atrocious at times. But then last year, he goes and hires Jim Knowles, and they turned that around. But also with that, he saw his offense slipping. You have Kyle McCord in there. Didn't really work out all that well. So this year he tries to turn that back around. He still has Jim Knowles, still a good defense, brings in Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins, tries to get that offense back going. So I see him making adjustments. I see him winning at a high level with his guys that he brought in on the recruiting trail. I think I still am holding out plenty of hope that he can eventually go win a national championship, but it's going to be about how much time do you give the guy to go make that happen before you decide to find a change in leadership.
Yeah, that's my thing. And, I don't want to spend too much time here because he's one of my losers of the week. So I'll kind of elaborate more there. But how much of it is an infrastructure thing as opposed to a Ryan Day thing?
Right.
It's kind of hard to mess up a job like Ohio State. And the job to me simply isn't, and it's the same thing I say about Lincoln Riley at USC. The job isn't simply to be a good coach and win those type of ball games. It's to win the games that we're talking about he's always losing. That's the job. And, it's fair to say that you're not out on him yet, but I haven't seen much to have any hope for the future that it'll get turned around. I know a lot of people, I think Josh Pate's one of the ones that are very adamant about this with Lincoln Riley and Ryan Day, that, they'll figure it out eventually. I believe that, I don't have any proof yet, but I believe they'll eventually turn it around. But my question is, how long do you give these guys to turn it around and win those ball games? Because to me, you look at a guy like Dan Lanning who took over Oregon, who wasn't in the greatest spot. They're winning those ball games. They're in the Pac-12 championship game. He's beaten Ohio State on his home field. He's going down to the wire. He's won some pretty big bowl games. You look at Kalen DeBoer, what he did at Washington. He had Washington in the national championship game, beat Texas in the Sugar Bowl, was able to win the Pac-12 title game over the likes of Dan Lanning. There's coaches at smaller institutions with far less resources than a $20 million or however many $1 million resource budget that have gotten it done with my opinion, tougher roads to get there. Ohio State really has to play 2 games a year. Well, have to play. Michigan, Penn State are really the only times they're going to be tried in the regular season. And if you can't win those games, if you can't win the big ones, to me, it's like you've had 6 years. Lincoln Riley hasn't been to the playoffs since 2019. We got to start holding these guys to the fire a little bit more, about me.
Yeah, if you hold them to a fire, though, that beard dye and that hair dye is going to start running down his face. But let's get to next. We have Ole Miss versus LSU. LSU got over top in overtime, and it was really sad. I mean, 2 of the last 3 Ole Miss has lost, and Ole Miss led that game for the entirety almost of regulation, and then they just imploded. And they're 2 losses, one versus Kentucky, now one versus LSU. What you've seen is late game situations, late game decision making. They have really struggled in a big way. In that Kentucky game, you had a chance to fall on a fumble late in that game. Kentucky gets on top of it. They score a touchdown. You go down, you miss a field goal. And in this game, you get into overtime and you have a holding penalty. And then you had, I believe, a delay of game immediately following the holding penalty. You set yourself back. Your kicker, luckily, and I mean luckily, knocks through a 57-yard field goal, something ridiculous like that. It was 57 yards. But then on the first play from scrimmage for LSU, here's Garrett Nussmeier to Kyron Lacey for a touchdown. It's just like their late game woes sort of continue. And for me, looking at this Ole Miss team and what I thought about them in the preseason and what I thought they were going to be, all that shit is off the table, man. That college football playoff is not in sight for you. Winning or competing for the top of the SEC, not in sight for you. You have a 1-2 record in the SEC, if I'm not mistaken, at this point. Like, this is very disappointing for Ole Miss.
100%. And to me, it's like, I'll get to the game in a second, but as far as the overview, It's the way it's happening. Ole Miss defense is literally one of the 5 to 10 best defenses in the country. They held LSU to 23 points, I believe. I don't remember the exact final score.
It was 29-26, but in regulation, they held them to 23 points, correct?
Right. So that is an explosive offense. They came into the game a top 5 defense in the country. They held them to 20 points in regulation. You have to find a way to score more points. This is literally his calling card, Lane Kiffin, that is. And to me, going to the game, it's just the land of missed opportunities, man. Like, I look at some of the stuff, and some of it's on Dart, but man, some of these drops are terrible. Some of these penalties are terrible. Trey Harris is one of the best wide receivers in the country. He's having as good of a season as anybody. But he drops a 85-yard touchdown that would have put the game out of reach early.
Yep.
You have some penalties that back you up on scoring drives that you're sitting there with a chance to put those games away, and now you're sitting here fighting for your life again. And you can't, and you've seen it time and time again in the SEC, you can't give teams another chance to get going, especially a team like LSU on their home field. You can't give them opportunity.
And I forgot to mention at the end of the third quarter, that was bad. That was really bad. Jackson Dart had 1 pick in the day, and that's when it happened because they get down there. They're in LSU. They're in the red zone. They're on LSU's 20. It's 1st and 10. Perfect situation if you know football. 1st and 10 on the 20 is about as good as it gets because you're not as bunched up as you normally would be if you're a little bit closer. It's not tight red zone. You still have plenty of space to work with. But guess what? Here comes a holding and another delay of game. And now you get to 1st and 25. Jackson Dart is thinking a little bit too much. He tries to take a bomb, and it gets picked off in the end zone. Now you have a touchback when you could have gone and scored right there to potentially put it out of reach. So this team just doesn't execute how I thought they would. With Jackson Dart, who has been in college for a long, long time. Trey Harris, all these wide receivers have been in college for a long, long time. Caden Prescore, tight end, been in college for a long, long time. I think that their offensive line has some issues, but I don't necessarily think that was the big reason that they lost this game. Maybe against Kentucky to a certain extent, but definitely not against LSU. LSU is not that great in the trenches. But yeah, when you look at LSU on the other side and you just look at their box score, this should be a win by Ole Miss. If you hold them to 24 carries for 84 yards and you pick them off twice, you should win that game. But 100%. You just floundered at all your opportunities and made too many mistakes.
100%. And it has to get fixed. It's like, I think they still have a favorable schedule, right? I think they still have Georgia on the schedule, if I'm not mistaken. But they should, I say should here, win the rest of those games. And 9-3, you don't know if that's going to be good enough to make the playoffs or not. But either way, it's a massive disappointment from what the expectations were going into the season. So I still think they have a lot to play for, especially with how the SEC is shaking out. Georgia could have 2 losses by the end of this week. Alabama or Tennessee will have 2 losses by the end of this week.
SEC is fucking crazy, dude. It is.
I'm expecting Texas A&M to have another loss or 2 during the regular season. So there will be opportunities there. But from what we came into the season expecting, they have not lived up to that at all.
I can't remember, at least in the last 5-6 years, SEC that cannibalized itself this bad.
No, not
because next week it's very possible where you could have obviously Alabama or Tennessee. That's kind of a play out game to a certain extent, and then you could very well have Georgia go beat Texas on the road, and every single team in the SEC having a loss. Like that's a very real possibility next weekend. All right, so I do have a pretty interesting question I want to pose and throw your way because this was the window. This was the window for Lane Kiffin, Jackson Dart, Ulysses Bentley in the backfield, all these great wide receivers. You bring in a bunch of guys on the defensive side of the ball to make yourself a real SEC defense. This was supposed to be college football playoff, potential national championship contending year. But now that's gone. That's off the table. Does this make a Florida jump maybe a little bit more attractive? And the reason I ask this is because he's going to have to rebuild at Ole Miss, and he's going to have to rebuild at Florida. Like he's going to have to rebuild no matter which way it goes. If he decides to step to Florida or if he stays back at Ole Miss. This conversation a couple of weeks ago, I think everybody said, well, Ole Miss, I think it's better built for him. But right now, it's just, I don't know. I think the perception of that conversation completely changes now that they have 2 losses.
Yeah, I think 100%. And the thing that entices a guy like Lane Kiffin, more than the resources, more than reinvigorating a team like Florida, DJ Lagway's there for you don't have to go find a quarterback. You don't have to go find some talent. You got Trey Wilson that's going to have to come back for another season at wide receiver. And the big thing to me, right, I think Lane Kiffin will love a job like Florida. Can he lure a guy like Pete Golden to come with him? Because for all the hell he called Alabama was never worse than the top 15 defense, I believe. They had a couple top 10 finishes under Pete Golden. The defense now is far improved under Pete Golden. And Pete Golden is a hellacious recruiter. He was great at Alabama. He's been great at Ole Miss. If he can get a guy like Pete Golden to come with him there at Florida, it makes the job a lot easier because they're going to have to find a general manager, a guy they believe in. But a guy like Pete Golden is a guy that can keep the train rolling recruiting and kind of give you a little bit of familiarity on the defense side of the ball. So my question would be is like, if Lane were to leave, does a guy like Pete Golden get a chance to move up to the head coach at Ole Miss? Because he couldn't pass the opportunity down.
He's done a heck of a job. Would you believe me if I told you there's Ole Miss fans over in my neck of the woods that are actually angry at Pete Golding for what happened on Saturday? And I'm just sitting there like, that makes no sense at all. First of all, you already have your hands tied as a defensive coordinator dealing with Lane Kiffin or a guy like Josh Heupel at Tennessee because they're going to play with pace. They're going to continue to go. They could be on the field for 15 minutes, but they could be on the field for 35 minutes. You don't really know. So you have to manage your
going to go for it on fourth down.
And also, what's he going to do about the untimely turnovers when they happen?
Yep.
The sudden change, he can't do shit about that. I mean, they probably should have only given up, 16 points in that game, but they end up giving 23 because the offense sort of gave the ball back to LSU. But enough of that. Texas, like I told you, I'm just kidding. But I know you were picking this because you have some, right. You were saying they were going to stick in Oklahoma because you have some ties to some of the coaches there at Oklahoma. But that was an ass kicking, 34-3. I still don't think this says that much about Texas, besides the fact that they are who we think they are. But I think this says more about Oklahoma just being a very middling program at this current moment with their offense and the way it's being managed. I will give Texas a lot of credit, though. Their defense is a lot better than I thought it would be after losing all the guys they lost a year ago, but I still don't think they've been tested in any meaningful way.
No. I think we're going to learn everything we need to know about Texas this week. Because they're finally playing a quarterback that can make them pay for some of the mistakes they make in the back end. I think they're a much improved defense for sure. The offense is going to be the offense under Sark. I mean, they're going to score points. But I think they're finally playing a quarterback in Carson Beck that can make them pay for their mistakes. They're finally playing some receiving cores. You're going to have, the Dominic Lovitz. You're going to have the Arian Smith that can stretch the field and put you in danger in a way they haven't been put under danger so far this season. So we're going to learn a lot about them. But I do have to give them credit for the way they handle business. If we've learned anything from this college football season, it's that anybody can be beat on any given day. So you just have to be on your P's and Q's every game, and they handle their business. I think that Oklahoma played well for the first half. I know the score kind of got out of hand at the end of the first half there, but Oklahoma had opportunities that they didn't take advantage of. They had some turnovers in minus territory, but that offense is just literally, you're missing your top 5 pass catchers, and your quarterback is running for his life. I feel bad for the kid because I think he's doing as best as you can really hope for him to do at this point. But they haven't had much they can hang their hat on, at least offensively. I think defensively, you could take some positives away from that game. But they're in an uphill battle because it's not going to get any easier for them from here on out. They still have to go. They still have to play Alabama. They still have some tough road games they're going to have to play this season. So what is a realistic scenario for them? 7 wins? 8 wins?
Probably.
If they get to 8 wins, that'd be a fantastic season, in my opinion, for Oklahoma. And what do they do with their quarterback situation from here on out?
Yeah, just watching that game, though, I just watched a good defense, just lose all hope for winning that game about a quarter and a half into it. Because they were playing lights out for a long time, but they're watching their offense. These are the yardages on each drive. 18 yards, negative 12 yards, 38 yards on 11 plays, 17 yards, 17 yards, 18 yards, 13 yards, and then negative 2 yards. And then in the second half, 16 yards, negative 4 yards, 19 yards. Their longest drive of the game was the one they ended the game on with 68 when no one cared anymore. I just saw a defense we're not going to win. We just have no chance. So we're just going to hold up as long as we can. And once the dam broke, once you saw, I think it was really the second touchdown of the game from Texas, you just saw the floodgates open and that Oklahoma team and that defense just lose all hope in their offense. And I think there's something that's tough. That's tough to watch. Yeah,
shout out to Silas Bolden. I want to give him a shout out. He's a guy who I loved at Oregon State last season. He hadn't, really been getting the ball like he should. They're a loaded offense, though. Isaiah Bond goes down with an injury. He's not as effective as you would hope for him to be. He's not in the game as much. Silas Bolden just finds a way to make plays, right? Like that fumble recovery in the end zone. Yeah. That was beautiful. See him give that effort, go down there. Some of those punt returns that he's just being a psychopath and not calling for a fair catch, and it's only 10 yards, right? He'll catch it on the hop, run for 10 yards, run for 20 yards. But those are the plays that gives your team life. Those are the plays that gives your team energy and momentum. And momentum is very real, especially in a game like that, at the Cotton Bowl, in a rivalry game. Those little bitty momentum shifts are huge, and they'll give your team a lot of boost. So I like a guy like that who isn't getting the ball like he should. He used to be.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. He's got 77 yards all year, but he's still playing hard in any role he has to play.
He's finding a way to affect the game. Like, he's an older guy, too. He's not one of these young guys trying to prove his stripes. He's an older guy who's used to being, if not the focal point, one of the major pieces of an offense, but he's still finding a way to make plays. And to me, that's a sign of, like, championship teams, right? When you have guys that are willing to sacrifice a little bit, or guys that know that, hey, I'm not getting what I probably should or what I deserve, but I'm still going to play 100% every time. I'm going to go field the punts if I'm not getting the ball. I'm going to go hustle after the play and go, recover a fumble in the end zone. To me, you need championship plays like that to win a game. So shout out to that guy. And that kind of speaks to, like, the culture that Sark has down there. That team is playing with some swagger that a few teams in the country are playing with right now.
All right, now winners and losers. I'm going to start with my winner for the week, and I'm going to go with my alma mater and some guys that I have become accustomed to, Dan Lanning and Kenny Dillingham, with big wins this week. My winner is coaches with Memphis ties, baby. When we saw Kenny Dillingham get to the University of Memphis, he was at GA working with quarterbacks. Dan Lanning, that was his first legit job as a linebackers coach at the University of Memphis. And I did, I know College Game Day did their big thing about his wife and her cancer diagnosis and beating cancer. I was there for the whole thing. And I have so much respect for Dan, because he still coached the same, man, didn't cut corners, never left the office early. He had to be strong for his players and for his family. And he did that in a big way. But what really strikes me about these two coaches is how quickly you see they have things going. Dan Lanning, it's not that long ago, he took over that job, and he has a win right now at home against the number 2 team in the country. He's number 2 in the country. Kenny Dillingham, after a year of just like complete unrest with that program, Herm Edwards left it in shambles. He's back at 5-1, man. And he's doing it with a lot of, transfers that are coming up a level, like not guys that are just from Power Fives or anything. He's finding the right guys, bringing them in, filling in the cracks. Cam Scatabo is really fun to watch. But I think the big thing that jumps out about both of them is the passion. Right. You see, like, after the game, Dan Lanning shoving the bussing with the boys guys, having a hell of a time because he's still young, still relatable. And Kenny Dillingham, same thing. You saw his post-game interview after they beat Utah on the field storming. I mean, he said, I was in these guys' shoes not too long ago. He starts jumping around with them, having a good time. I think there's a passion that they coach with that I think will be lasting. So I want to give them my winner of the week.
Shout out to them, man. My winner of the week is an individual. I normally like to do coaches. Sometimes I'll do a player, but Tyler Warren, for what he did against USC, was incredible. Because USC's defense is, for all the trouble they've had this season, USC's defense is much improved. They came into the game 34th in total defense, and that might not blow people's heads off, but they finished last season in the 110s. They were one of the worst defenses in USC history last season. So for what they've been able to do with a lot of the same guys is incredible. But Tyler Warren, they had no answer for this guy. He had 17 catches, which is tied for the most all-time by an FBS tight end, 224 yards, and one of the craziest touchdown catches I've ever seen. Literally, Andy Kotelnicki's a wizard for that one. They shift the formation, and they have Tyler Warren go to center. He snaps the ball, then runs a vertical route up the field, and then he mosses the guy in the end zone. And it's just, they weren't able to account for him all game. He always found a way to make a play, and you don't see that very often from anybody, let alone the tight end. So to see that guy come out there and really dominate the game like that, I have to give him all the credit in the world, because he kept them in the game early, and he found a way to make plays in the second half. And without that performance, which was literally an all-time performance for a tight end at the FBS level, Penn State wouldn't have come away with that win. So huge shout out to Tyler Warren.
Yeah. Now, my loser of the week, I'm going to go with Cam Rising at Utah. I'm sorry. It's just ridiculous. He's holding that program hostage, dude. I'm sorry. It's true. It's true. He is in his 7th year. He's clearly not healthy enough to play. He's got this fat-ass brace on his right leg, and he's limping around, can't press off the damn leg, throws 3 picks, doesn't get that offense going anywhere. I know Isaac Wilson, Zach Wilson's little brother, has not been good. He would have given them a way better shot to win that game. That's why I'm saying he's holding them hostage, because every time that, Cam Rising asks or, talks to, Kyle Whittingham, and he says, jump, you have Kyle Whittingham asking how high all the time. It's just, I just feel like Cam Rising is at the point in his career where, one, you've been injured so much. Two, you have probably limited the amount of recruiting they can do at the quarterback position for 7 years now. It's time to move on. And now they're talking about an 8th year, Kai. I don't know how you feel about that. It's time, man. It's enough. Enough is enough. And I think Kyle Whittingham needs to respect himself a little bit more and make sure that does not go through. But based on what I heard in his press conference, he's actually giving it thought to bring Cam Rising back for another 8th freaking season. But my big loser, Cam Rising.
Yeah, I feel bad for the kid because that's not the way you want to end your career. But I mean, listen, man, 7 years and 7 years, 8 would be probably ridiculous, man. I got to go. My biggest loser is a tie between Ryan Day and Lincoln Riley. I'll start with Lincoln Riley. For as accomplished as he is, he's going in the wrong direction as a head coach. During his seasons at Oklahoma, they never lost more than 2 games in the season. Pretty remarkable. That's pretty lofty standard to uphold. But you go from there to USC, where you have Caleb Williams, who was the Heisman Trophy winner, the best player in college football the last couple of seasons. You go 11-3 that first year, but you lose 2 of the last 3 games. You lose in the Big 12 championship game against Utah, and then you lay an egg against Tulane with late game management. Defense falls apart. Then you come back. You go 6-0 to start the season, 2023. Then you lose 5 out of your last 6 in the regular season. Then you beat Louisville in the bowl game, kind of have some momentum going there. Miller Moss is playing well. Then you come back this season, and now you're sitting here 3-3. Lincoln Riley is 11-10 in his last 21 ball games as a head coach. They're 1-3 in the Big Ten so far. They have a losing record in conference play the last 2 seasons combined. It's for a guy that gets as much bail as he does. I know the tides are starting to turn a little bit. But for a guy that's gotten as much bail as he's gotten over the last couple of years, I want to kind of even separate him from Ryan Day, because even Ryan Day has managed to win a lot of conference games.
I don't think they're in the same category at all. Yeah.
So Lincoln Riley, man, 11-10 in the last 21 games at USC is not acceptable, man. 1-3 in the Big Ten this season. You've had a 7-point lead in every single game you've lost, a 7-point fourth quarter lead, So you had the chance to put ball games away 3 separate times. And 2 of those games are against teams that you're probably more talented than. I think they're more talented than Michigan, and I know for sure they're more talented than Minnesota. So it was 2 games that you let slip. And then the last game, you're up 17 points on a team like Penn State, who wasn't used to being in that position. Drew Allen's not the type of guy that should be able to lead a comeback like that. So you end up giving up a 17-point lead. Late game management is kind of wonky there at the end of the game. You get into overtime, you're not able to produce anything. You miss the field goal. They set up the field goal. You lose that game 33-30. It's too many. We're so close. He keeps saying we're a play away from being 6-0. Well, you're a couple of plays away from being 2-4 as well. LSU could have easily beat you. You were down 17 points to Wisconsin at home before that game flipped around on his head, and you kind of pulled away there at the last 2 minutes of that game. They were still driving and had a chance to compete there at the end of that game. So they're a couple of plays away from having a worse record than they have right now. To me, you have to go forward a little bit, Lincoln Riley, and to me, the time for excuses is up. You're at a place like USC. You're not playing the toughest schedule in the country. He says he's playing the toughest schedule in the country. You haven't. And I just want to leave that at that. Ryan Day, we've kind of talked about it a little bit. But to me, my biggest question is Ryan Day the catalyst behind the continued success after Urban Meyer? Or is the infrastructure so good? Do you have guys like Brian Hartline that are recruiting at such a high level, getting you so much talent? In the transfer portal where you're able to reload some of the talent, you go get a Caleb Downs, you go get a Will Howard. Is that the driving force behind the actual success? Because to me, when you look at a $20 million bankroll for NIL, allegedly, we don't know if that's actually the number, but that's the number that's been floated around. Then you look at how much money they're paying their support staff and their coaches. To me, it's hard to be a bad team when you have that amount of resources around you. So if you're not able to get over the hump and win those big games, and the Verdi's still I'm going to give them a little bit of bail because they still can win a national championship this year. I do believe that. Mm-hmm. But up until this point, man, it hasn't been good enough, and you have to start holding these guys accountable. Because, like I said, I used Lanning as an example. I used DeBoer as an example. There's been coaches at other places that have made it work with less.
Yep, for sure. I hear you. Now, the service academies seem to love us because they keep giving us great guests. We had Brian Newberry last week, but this week we're going to bring on the Army Athletic Director, the 30th Athletic Director in Army West Point history, Mike Buddie, will join us right here on the other side. I need to shift everyone's thinking on like quarterback prospects. The most important thing when evaluating a quarterback is where's he actually going to end up?
Yeah. Why are we taking somebody if we can't tailor make a system towards them, or if they don't fit the system we're already in. And I'll give an example on that of what's already happened to show that it's shifting that way. It's the person that we just talked about in Jaden Daniels. What did Washington do? They went out and got the coordinator that could perfectly craft a system to Jaden Daniels. Instead of trying to fit a square peg.
Instead of bringing in Caleb Williams and making his OC Shane fucking Waldron. You know what I mean? Who couldn't even get Gino up and going.
Exactly. So, and that's my point, is there's nothing more important to a quarterback than a system. A quarterback can be ultra talented, but if you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, 99% of the time it's not going to work.
Tune in to On the Bluff with Christian Fowler and Gabe Kuhn every Tuesday at 12 p.m. on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Hey, we got Tyler Cole here. What's your take?
Hold on, let me get this out the way. Hey, fight! So look, I got a take for you today. The Grizzlies are a bigger threat in the West than the Lakers. Speak on it.
Go ahead. Well, first of all.
Originally, I wasn't planning on doing it. I was like, I don't know. I'm not too fun to being in front of a camera. Like, right. I like taking behind it. I like being behind the camera. Mm-hmm. And Mom was like, no, you're doing it. And I was like, okay, I can't argue with your mom, man. And the Grizzlies are my favorite team. So it's like, there's no arguing here. Like, we can go back and forth regardless.
Tune in to The Anthony Sane Show, Wednesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. weekly on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Back rolling, and we have a treat today. We have the 30th Director of Athletics at Army West Point. That would be Mike Buddie. He joins us now. Mike, how's it going? I know it's been a whirlwind of a season so far. Been a fun one.
Yeah, I mean, it's going great. Ask any AD right now that's got a team that's playing well and still unblemished on the defeat side. Things are going pretty well, but we're trying to stick to what got us to this point. But it's been a fun ride so far, for sure.
Yeah, and I do have to say a quick apology. I know Coach Monken was on with Pat McAfee. You're stuck with us today.
Hey,
but that was fun. I saw his interview, and it looked like he did a heck of a job. And Pat and them definitely sort of asked a lot of the questions we're going to ask you today. And I sort of want to start in one place because Army and Navy, you joined the AAC this year. First time you guys have both been undefeated this far into the season since 1960. What do you attribute that type of success on the football side to? Because you guys are not able to take advantage of NIL and transfer portal. You lose some guys in transfer portal. You're not able to gain necessarily from that. But there's other schools around the country that take advantage of that. But you guys still sit here, Army and Navy, undefeated at this point in the season.
Yeah, I can't speak to that other school down in Maryland. But, what the difference here is, things that we believe matter in life, not just in football and certainly in serving your country, is you have to be disciplined and you have to have chemistry and you have to be good communicators and you have to trust each other. And so what I love about both of the academies that are playing well is it's just a reminder that just because somebody's $100,000 or a $500,000 talent, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to translate into victories. And it doesn't mean that it's going to make you a more cohesive team. And I would argue sometimes it makes you a less cohesive team. And so, we've stuck to the fundamentals. It's academy football, right? Our belief is that if you can gain 3 yards on every play and don't turn the ball over, it's impossible to lose the football game. Mm-hmm. And, that's not a high selling point to the best wide receivers in the country that want to catch 60-yard touchdown passes. But that's how we approach it. And so far, so good.
Yeah. We had Navy's head coach on. We will call him the other school down here. But one thing I asked him was about, playoff implications. And he kind of redirected it and said, hey, our main focus is the Commander-in-Chief trophy. Do you kind of share that same sentiment? Is that more important than making a college football playoff, winning those 2 games against the other service academies?
Yeah, somebody asked me that the other day, and I would agree with Coach Newberry. I mean, it's if you had our choice between being the 12 seed in the CFP or winning the CIC, we're going to take the Commander-in-Chief trophy every day of the week. Those are the only two other schools in Division I that kind of play by the same set of rules that we do, that have similar challenges that we do. Don't get me wrong. We think that both is possible, and that's certainly our intention. And, we may have to go through Navy twice to get both of those, and that'll be no small task as well as they're playing. But yeah, the Commander-in-Chief trophy is just meaningful. It's meaningful to our graduates. It's meaningful to the young men. And by the way, Air Force still has a vote in this as well, and they're going to play like their hair's on fire to try to make sure that we don't end up with that trophy again. And so it keeps us plugging. It's a great tool when you're not having the season that you want, that those games still matter. But in a case like where we're going so far this year, we just got to keep staying focused on the fundamentals and what we're doing to keep those goals in front of us.
Now, honestly, you're around him a lot, I'm sure, and you obviously have watched his teams since you took over. But what makes Coach Monken such a great leader for that program? Obviously, I've heard rumors about him, and other being wanted elsewhere. But what makes him such a good leader for your football program there at Army?
In a nutshell, it's trust, it's care, and it's accountability. I think some of the civilian institution head coaches, they're in really tough positions. You win the recruiting wars that can take you a full year and now 7 figures. It's really hard to hold these young people accountable if there's a fear that they might transfer. We don't have to worry about that. And that's an advantage to being here. Certainly there's plenty of disadvantages, but Coach Monken holds these young men accountable. And I mentioned care because he's able to hold them accountable. He tears into them like an old school coach, but he knows all of their names and all of their high schools and all of their parents. And, if they're having girlfriend troubles or whatever it may be. And I think those of us who ever played a sport, like coaches can ride you pretty hard if you know that they care about you as a human being and you've got their best interests at heart. And I think Coach and our entire staff do that extremely well. They get to know these young men throughout the recruiting journey. And then they dig in even deeper, because part of the academy life is you've got to just keep your thumb on the pulse of these young people and make sure that they're taking care of themselves mentally and spiritually and physically and all those things. And so because Coach cares so much, because he's earned their trust, he can hold them accountable at a high level. And our kids are tough and they respond to it. And we're fortunate that that's the case and that we have that fit with a head coach who's surrounded himself with great position coaches, and then it's a unique type of young person that raises their hand to come to the academy.
Awesome. You've been at every level, right? You've been an admin at the FCS level. You've been an admin at Wake Forest at your alma mater, and now you're at the Service Academy. Can you kind of speak to the differences between the three of those places and those levels, and what helps? What's different? What's unique that it kind of struggle with now that you're at a Service Academy? You talk about this perspective that you gain from being in so many different places.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And it's been a long journey. I spent a decade at Wake Forest and certainly a Power 4 school on paper, but we were always having to fight for inches. We were surrounded by Duke and North Carolina and NC State fans, and we found ways, right, between Jim Grobe, who coached there, and then Dave Clawson came on. And it's really just having an attention to detail. We're never going to outspend anybody. But you got to outthink them and outwork them and hope to outdiscipline them and win on the margins where you can, right? The time of possession or penalties or whatever it might be. And then just focus and on where you can be great and try to exploit those. I think all three of my stops are unique in that they spend an inordinate amount of time on special teams because, that might be a way to get a 6-point play on a defense that's really difficult to score on. And so little things like that. Wake Forest was a great experience. It put me in a good position to go to Furman to get my first chance to be an athletic director. And I learned so much from Coach Bruce Fowler and then Clay Hendricks there on just how to adjust between FCS and FBS football. And again, just an offensive line can win or lose you a game at the FCS level. And it's hard to find young people that, they all want to play at the big time schools and they all want to play in the bowl subdivision, but convincing kids that, hey, there's an opportunity for you to be special at the FCS level, and then figuring out ways to keep them there, which, of course, when I was there, name, image, and likeness wasn't a thing, and the transfer portal weren't a thing, and that's changed. And then, the ultimate perspective and the ultimate shift is just, I'm just started my 6th year here at West Point. It took me 2 years to figure out what all the abbreviations meant, to what the words on these PowerPoint slides, to be able to meet with a board that's, made up of congressmen and women, presidential appointees, and just navigating that leadership challenge that exists, where there's a political aspect, there's this governmental aspect. Our student athletes are federal employees, so figuring out how best to advocate for the young men and women who come to West Point not to improve their draft status in the NBA or the WNBA. They come here to serve their country. They come here to learn to be leaders of character. And they know that they're going to get up every morning at 6 a.m. And they know that they're going to be playing soccer and tennis and wrestling against people who are getting to practice 20, 25 hours a week. We might only get 12 hours a week, because when they're done with school, they go out to the training fields and they've got military duties and fitness tests and ruck marches and all these things that go into a day here. And we just have to be okay with it and say, you know what? The stuff that we're learning in the classroom and the stuff that we're learning from our military instructors should give us a level of toughness and preparedness and mental and physical agility and flexibility to still be competitive, even if we're not getting as much time working on our bunt defense or our set pieces in soccer. And it's really neat that we're still able to remain competitive at the level at which we find ourselves.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. I can't imagine the adjustment, because I was just going back and forth with your sports information director, and they said 1400 Eastern time to get this interview done, and I had to think about it a few minutes to make sure I was on the same page. Now, for you, I mean, you used to play Major League Baseball. First of all, have you been enjoying the Major League Baseball playoffs?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio originally, so I was a Cleveland Indians fan growing up, and then I had the opportunity to break in as a New York Yankee and be on a couple World Series championship teams. So the fact that the Yankees and I guess the Guardians now are playing each other, I really can't lose, or I can't win, depending on which way you look at it. It's been fun to follow.
Yeah. Now, take me back to those 4 years in Major League Baseball and what you were thinking about, what you were actually going to do after you got done with your athletic ventures. Was this on the table? Was this something you wanted to get into? Did you want to be an athletic director?
I'll be honest with you, kind of like my kids, I didn't know what the hell an athletic director did. You could argue maybe I still don't know what an athletic director does, but no, I mean, I'll be honest with you guys. I thought I'd get to play 4 or 5 years of minor league baseball, and my plan was to position myself to maybe move into a front office role. I loved the game. I ended up playing 13 seasons, and by the time my 13th season was up, all the people that I kind of respected and looked up to and were my mentors kind of off the field, they were all divorced or out of the game, every single one of them. So when I retired in 2003, I had a wife and 2 children, and I needed a job, and I wish I could tell you that I was strategic in my approach, but I was back in Winston-Salem. I had Tommy John surgery. I was rehabbing. I had left college after 3 years, so I was a full-time enrolled student at the age of 34, being a senior in college, right when the movie Old School came out with Will Ferrell. I was that guy walking around campus, older than half of my professors, but I got my degree, and I went to work in the development office at Wake Forest as a fundraiser. A year into that, I switched over to be an athletics department fundraiser. And then the more and more I paid attention to it, the less and less I was around young people, because when you're a fundraiser, you're calling on people that have, the financial wherewithal to donate. You're not hanging around with the football team. And I just wasn't very fulfilled. I had a conversation with the athletic director at the time, Ron Wellman, who said, hey, if you think you want to do what I do, let me expose you to more of it. And so that was a turning point for me. And from that point on, it was about another 4 years where I was getting to sit in on, Nike renegotiations and conference meetings and supervising some sports and getting to do some hiring and firing. And that put me in a position to ultimately in 2015 get that first AD job at Furman. And I've loved every minute of it, of every day.
Awesome. When we have players on and coaches on like that ask questions, but I've never asked an administrator this. So I'm going to ask you, as a former athlete, you probably have your superstitions and your, the ways you like to operate. But do you have a process for game day? Do you have any rituals? Like, hey, do you have to eat breakfast at this restaurant? Do you have to sit in the same seat at the venue every time? Do you have your process and your pregame rituals or in-game rituals when you're watching the football game there?
Yeah, it's more for me. It's more about fashion. I kind of want to look. I want to look good on the sideline. I was a below average pitcher in my career, and I knew that if I was superstitious, it was only going to make me worse. So I was like the anti-superstitious guy. I would step on the foul line. I'd come in after one inning and say, "Hey, you guys, I got a no-hitter going." Although a lot of times I didn't make it out of the first inning with a no-hitter still intact. I am a creature of habit, but no, I don't wear the same underwear or the same shoes or anything like that. But I try to, black, gray, and gold, your options are limited. I try to wear the same color scheme as our guys are wearing. But no, I kind of don't subscribe to that theory. And it's really freed me as a human being, because I know people that, wouldn't wash their underwear for months at a time, and it's no fun being around those people.
Yeah. That's gross. I don't want to be around you to smell that. Now, final thing I want to bring up, because you guys have joined the American Athletic Conference. I'm an alum from the University of Memphis, played football there, and obviously glad to have you. But what went into that decision, being independent for so long, and then finally on the football side deciding, hey, it's time to jump in here in the American Athletic Conference with one of your biggest rivals as well in Navy? Your biggest rival, not one of the biggest rival in Navy.
That's right. We were very fortunate, right? It was probably a 10-month process. It started with Commissioner Oresco at the time. For my first 5 years, Coach Munkin and the superintendent and I, none of us had an interest in joining a conference. It was just a meeting of several different streams that all came through at the same time. One was the college football playoff expansion. And there were two threads of that. One was just having access. The year before I got here, Army football was 11-2 and had to pray and cross their fingers and toes to even get invited to a bowl game, because as an independent, there were no tie-ins. And we just thought, if our kids are able to get that level of success and they're in the conversation that we ironically find ourselves in right now, we want to make sure that there was a pathway to being one of those top 5 conference champions. The second piece of that puzzle was when the college football playoff expanded, there was no recalculation of the financial share that independents would receive. So UConn and UMass and us really were having these conversations, because BYU was already committed to joining the Big 12, and Notre Dame is treated differently, as they should be. But we were just kind of stuck with this flat fee that was a fraction of what schools like Stephen F. Austin, who were making the jump to Conference USA, they were going to get 4 times the amount of what we were getting just by joining a conference. And then the last piece of that puzzle was, in complete transparency, Cincinnati, SMU, Central Florida, and Houston, who all had kind of a stranglehold on that league, or certainly were the top investors in their programs and had a lot of success. When they left the league, Coach Munkin looked at me and said, "Hey, there's still some, South Florida, Tulane, Memphis, some great programs, East Carolina, but I think we can be competitive with them." And so all of those things happened at the same time. I was able to talk to the leadership on the football team, because I just thought, this isn't just my decision to make. They were all, I drew up a schedule of what our next 4 seasons looked like, what we currently had scheduled, versus what it could look like if they decided that the American was something they wanted to pursue. And they looked at the schedule and said, what are we missing? Like, why wouldn't we do this? Give us the opportunity to win a conference championship. It protects the commander-in-chief. And it was just too good to be true. And then Coach Oresco and Commissioner Oresco and the ADs in the American were willing to hear us out. We negotiated something that made sense. And then I juxtapose that to your alma mater with Ed Scott, who had just gotten in the chair.
Yep.
He had to make a decision about joining the Pac-12 in less than 2 days. Our counterpart at Air Force had to decide, do we join the American or stay in the Mountain West? In 2 days. I mean, it took us 10 months to feel good about all the details and how would it mean. And that was just for football only. So we're really happy about where we land. Our colleagues in the league have treated us remarkably well. We had a favorable schedule here this year. Clearly looking at it, we thought, we're missing the top 3 teams in the preseason poll. And so we just kind of felt, hey, the stars are aligning. We got a really tough team. And so far they've taken care of business and they've made us look like it was a good decision, but we're only halfway through the season, as we all know.
For sure. Now, before I let you go, can I get a Go Army Beat Navy from you?
Hell yeah. Go Army Beat Navy.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, I appreciate it. This was very fun.
Thank you.
Guys, thanks for having me on. I appreciate you covering the Group of 5 the way you do. It's great stuff.
Of course. He is Army AD Mike Buddie.
Yuki Mania.
Oh, boy.
I was thinking, I don't know if you know this or not, but Yuki on Instagram has posted 10 times. His last post was him in a Grizzlies uniform.
Okay.
He's posted 10 times. He has 630,000 followers. I was thinking, I don't know if you agree with this or not, that we are going to title this show Yuki Kawamura. That's it. It's just his name. See how many views we can get. Apparently, Yuki's a bigger deal in Japan because he's kind of like the Steph Curry of Japan. He's 5'8".
Yes.
We can relate to him.
Yes.
We can do what he does.
No, we can't.
Well, I'm not us. I'm just saying the collective of the people.
I want the people to say, no, y'all can't do what he does. Just because you're the same size.
But they believe he can. They believe they can.
You can believe it, but I'm just telling you can't do it.
Tune in to the Night Court Podcast with your hosts, Rob Fisher and Brevin Knight, on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Having it at El Marone is great because you greatly reduce the number of people you can have attend. So therefore, being able to get into the building just makes it a more special event. Like it is more, dare I say, romantic in a sense, right? It's more intimate that you are in there with it.
Well, I think the El Marone thing and what they did Friday it'll work, but there was just no like promotion behind it, right? Like,
yeah.
Outside of it being mentioned, I think once, I had forgotten that it was last Friday. People talking about the death of Memphis Madness, it needs to be studied, blah, blah, like, we don't recruit high school kids anymore, and that's what that was for.
Sure.
You're having this big hyped event with entertainers, rappers that they like
exactly
the whole showcase to show the program off, and we don't have that anymore because we're not recruiting high school kids. You might get 1 or 2 a class, but it's not like it used to be.
Tune in to Tigers Untapped with TJ Willis and Trey Lasley every Wednesday at 3 p.m. on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
All right, we're called G5 Classified for a reason because we do talk Group of 5 football as well. So we need to do our Group of 5 check-in, and we're going to start right here with Army and Navy. Just got done talking with athletic director from Army, Mike Buddie. I'm sure he's happy about Army being ranked 23 in the recent AP poll, and also Navy at 25 in the AP poll. 2 American Athletic Conference teams. Kind of weird to think the American Athletic Conference in the current state it's in has the most ranked teams in the Group of 5, but here we are. It's the first time, Kai, that both of them have been ranked since 1960. 1960. It's also the latest into a season that both of them have been undefeated since 1945. Think about that. I mean, that is World War II times, brother. That is insane. But I think a lot of the reasons that we talked about with Mike Buddie and Brian Newberry last week are we can attribute it to that. You have a lot of guys that are willing to stay for 4 years. You can build a program as opposed to a lot of the opponents you're playing against because they're turning over their rosters every year. And I think that, there's something to be said about everybody going into the transfer portal and the high school recruits that you didn't used to be able to get, having no choice but to come on down and go to your program, right? Like you're able to get a better type of high school recruit, a better type of high school athlete. So I think there's a lot of reasons that we're seeing this. And I got to be honest, man, I'll be the first one to admit when I'm wrong. Like I thought I left both of these programs, really military academies in the new age of NIL and transfer portal. I left them for dead, and they're proving me wrong this year.
Yeah, man, me as well. I thought they would be decent, like, make a bowl game type good. But we're talking about both of these teams potentially having to play twice. One for the conference and one to maybe potentially get into a playoff type situation. So you look at these teams and what they've been able to do. I think it's really cool to hear them talk about how they've been able to use, the opposite end of the NIL and the transfer portal to their advantage. Like we just said, they don't have to worry about going to recruit those type of guys. They don't have to worry about if my kid is going to be here for 4 or 5 years or not. They can get their guys, and the way they play football is sustainable. You don't have to have the highest level of talent, but once you mix that with guys that are a little bit more high end that you've been able to get because of the transfer portal, and maybe some of those guys have fallen through the cracks, you get the results that you have now. And I think it's going to be sustainable for the long term for most of those teams. And, you look at the way they've been playing. We talked about it last week, but Navy's added more wrinkles to it. They're throwing the ball a little bit more, and they're doing it efficiently. Maybe that can attract some of these receivers that aren't getting the bigger scholarships offers that they want to come play for them. And once you start to get that rolling a little bit, it could be sustainable. So I'm really happy to see them in this position. And hopefully those teams are 10-2, 11-1, potentially undefeated when they play each other, because that'll be a hell of a job for the nation. And I think we all watch those games anyway because we like it. Man, the way they're talking about it, like they're saying, playoffs are cool, but we want to win the Commander-in-Chief trophy.
Right.
So the way they talk about the game and the way the country feels about the game is only going to be amplified this year. So I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll be undefeated because they both have Notre Dame left on the schedule. But I think 10-2, 11-1, like that's written, because outside of Notre Dame for Navy, it's Charlotte, Rice, South Florida, Tulane, which could be a trouble with Tulane. I think they should, based on what I saw from South Florida, they should kick the shit out of South Florida, East Carolina, and then Army in the Army-Navy game, which doesn't actually count because the committee's already going to have decided what bowl you're going to and everything. And Army is just like outside of Notre Dame. Think about this: East Carolina Air Force, North Texas, UTSA, and then, of course, Navy. Like, it's just they should be 10-win teams in all likelihood with where they're pacing right this second. All right, now let's get into Ashton Jeanty. Ashton Jeanty is, and it feels like we talk about him every week, but he is outpacing Barry Sanders' 1988 season. I have this from my phone, and I want to go ahead and pull it up. It's from College Football on Fox. But you'll see on the left, in 1988, Barry Sanders ran for 2,628 yards. Through 6 games, he had 1,156 yards. Right now, Ashton Jeanty has 1,248 yards through those same 6 games. He's outpacing Barry Sanders' single-season rushing season by 92 yards through 6 games. This guy is ridiculous. He should be the leader for the Heisman. I don't care if you have this slant against the group of 5 and you talk about who he's playing. I don't care if he's playing at UL Monroe or Alabama. These types of numbers through 6 games need to be recognized by the Heisman Committee. There's no excuse otherwise.
100%, man. And, I tweeted this, I think it was week 3. But after the performances, I was like, listen, I don't care about records. I don't care about group of 5. I don't care about Big 12. If your top 2 for the Heisman isn't Ashton Jeanty and Travis Hunter, you're doing it wrong. Yeah. What Ashton Jeanty is doing right now, even since then, is incredible. And then when you put in the context that he's actually sat out the second half of 2 of those ball games.
He's played 17 quarters of a possible 24. Put that into context.
He's missed about almost 2 games of action if we want to go there. It's like those numbers are laughable, and he's doing it against everybody. He did it against Oregon. He had over 200 yards all-purpose against Oregon, and should have had more because they didn't give him the ball for one time in the last 8 minutes of the game. So he's doing it against everybody, and we don't see this very often. And I'm tired of the people trying to discredit it because it's Boise State. Newsflash, that Boise State team is top 18 in the country. They're going to play UNLV here in a couple of weeks. Whoever wins that ball game is going to be a top 15 to 12 team in the country, maybe. I don't see many teams that can give Boise State real trouble for the rest of the season because of Ashton Jeanty. So as long as he's healthy and producing at this clip, you have to put him in at the top right now.
Yeah, and also the degree of difficulty on all of his 50+ yard runs are ridiculous. He breaks 5 tackles, hops over a guy, and then runs the rest of the way. It's not like he's just getting into the open field because his offensive line is Joe Moore award worthy. Okay, he has to make people miss in a phone booth, break tackles, and then go get an open space. He's second in the country in broken tackles. So
there's this map that shows Ashton Jeanty's rushing stats compared to teams. There's I can't add them up all right now. Right. There's only 14 to 15 teams in the country that have more rushing yards total than he has as an individual. It's something insane. The map is insane. I'm going to try to put it up to the screen here. But if you kind of focus on it, all the blue, that's the amount of yards that Ashton Jeanty has compared to those
to the rest of the country, right?
Almost the entire country. So what he's doing right now is insane. I don't care about the competition level, and he's already proven he could do it against the team that just beat Ohio State and that's ranked number 2 in the country. So Ashton Jeanty's on a record pace, and he should get all the praise that he's getting right now.
But what did you think about what Travis Hunter said? He was with RG3 and his wife on their podcast, and here's the 2 quotes I'll focus on. Quote, I mean, y'all see Ashton Jeanty. It's not like we haven't seen a running back that's good. We haven't seen a player that plays both ways, and I'm going to keep saying that. So he's obviously saying, I'm more deserving. Right. Then he said this, and this is stupid to me. This is a bad argument. But, hey, he's a kid. Quote, he has 95 carries for 1,000 yards. First of all, he's got like 120-something for 1,200. But he said, if I had 95 catches, how many yards do you think I'd have? Well, that's the point. You don't have 95 catches.
Right.
you have. If you had 95 catches through 6 games, you would absolutely be the leader for Heisman. I can promise you that, especially if you were playing corner on the other side. But that's not how it works. He didn't have to go after him. I think they're both. I think it's neck and neck. I think we're right here. I'd give Ashton Jeanty the lead. But Travis Hunter is right there, and this is going to be a really fun one to watch. I think it's a breakup of the monotony we have seen of, best quarterback on a college football playoff team, right? Like that I just break up the monotony of that, and I'll be happy by the end of the year.
Yeah, and kind of, commenting on Travis's comments, I kind of got to give RG3 a little bit of flack here. You kind of walk
leading questions. He was leading.
Yeah, he literally said the question was posed like, you have to start speaking these things into existence. You can't be scared to speak these things into existence. So he kind of put the battery in his back a little bit, but kind of commenting on the first thing. It's like, I don't think he was discrediting Jeanty. I've seen a lot of it's become a hot button topic. To me, it was like
he was building himself up.
Yeah, and it was like one of the ultimate signs of respect. It's like he didn't say Cam Ward, he didn't say Jalen Milroe, he didn't say Dylan Gabriel. He only thought about one guy as his chief competition, and that was Ashton Jeanty. And then go to the second thing. It's kind of funny. Like, yeah, you're not going to have 95 catches in 6 games, Travis. But I will say Travis is 10th in the country in receiving yards. He's tied for 13th in touchdowns. So he's only 3 behind the leader in touchdowns. And he's missed the game as well. And then you couple that with what he's doing on defense. It's never been done before. Yes. It's never been seen. These guys are both doing historic things. And we should have both of those guys on a pedestal. We shouldn't be comparing them and asking them questions like, kind of baiting them against each other. Appreciate him for what he's doing because it may not be done ever again, and appreciate what Ashton Jeanty is doing because if he is able to pass Barry Sanders, I don't foresee a situation where this will happen again, especially in the NIL era where you're going to have 2 or 3 backs in the backfield.
Yeah, and final quick thing, I think it's with Travis Hunter, it's disingenuous as hell to keep comparing him to Champ Bailey and Charles Woodson. They were not near the offensive players he is. So like just stop. Like Champ Bailey had 400 yards receiving or something like that, and Charles Woodson was like 231. Like it's just come on. Like let's leave. Let's check that one. Let's leave that one out. We're done with those conversations. He is different than anyone we've ever seen in history, and that's okay. Is he somewhat similar? Sure, but it's not the same thing even remotely. All right, now final thing. I'm going to hand it over to you. The ass kicking chickens are back, baby. How about them Jacksonville State Gamecocks starting off 0-3 now at 3-3?
Yeah, it feels good. I'm not going to lie. I'm just going to rattle off some stats right here. I've been keeping track because it just seems like they've been out of line and they have been just absolutely absurd. In the last 3 games, Jacksonville State has 991 rushing yards, 161 points scored, 18 rushing touchdowns, 21 tackles for loss, 8 interceptions, and 6 forced fumbles that have been recovered. Jesus. They're 3-0 in those games, 2-0 in Conference US play. And ESPN has them favored for every game they play here on out. And that's including going on to the road to Liberty because Liberty is undefeated, but they haven't looked great in the games they've played against subpar competition. So those are going to be winnable games for Jacksonville State. They play Middle Tennessee State next week, and I'm expecting another big game. And maybe Sam Houston State game. That's going to be tough because Sam Houston looks very good this season. But, man, it's good to get back on track. And I think a little bit of it is just the competition level, right? You started off the season with Coastal Carolina, and you hadn't figured out your quarterback situation yet, which I think that game will go a lot different if they play it again because they have their quarterback figured out. They're not in game 1 of a new defensive scheme. So you kind of have the team figured out. And then you have the Louisville game, outmatched against Louisville. Louisville is just simply a better team. And then you lose a heartbreaker at the end where you're literally going in to score, you're in overtime, and you're on the 1-yard line, and then you snap the ball over the quarterback's head in the game you should have won. So it has some tough breaks here, but now they're getting into the games in the Conference USA where they're better than most of these teams. And as long as they're able to continue running the football and forcing turnovers like this, they're top in the country, second in the country in turnover margin right now. So it's going to be good for Jacksonville State to keep playing on these stages, especially midweek with the CUSA action, and the action will be next month. But I think they're going to be prime and maybe to win a Conference USA title here. At the very least, make a bowl game,
right,
and have a chance to make history as the first team to be able to win 2 bowl games in their first 2 seasons as an FBS program. So that would be ecstatic. If that can be the end goal for this season, I would be happy with that. So happy to see them back on track.
You said 991 yards rushing and 18 rushing touchdowns
in 3. And listen, they've taken the foot off the gas in the last 3 games. They've benched the starters for the fourth quarter. They haven't been finishing these games too. So I'm counting. If they leave the starters in, we could be seeing 1,300 rushing yards, 200 points. It could be something crazy. So shout out to Rich Rod.
I was going to say, that's Rich Rod being Rich Rod right there. Yeah, all right, now Group of 5 game of the week this week, we're going to go to UNLV. They're -7 at Oregon State. Now, this is a big game for them. I really think, if they want to stay nationally, on the same stage sort of as Boise State is right now, their conference cohort, they need to go ahead and win this game and probably cover. But they've been playing really well. They came off a bye week. I feel good about them in this game. But obviously they're going to have to show us. This would be a big win for them, and you would improve to 6-1. And then next week would be the big one. Then you'd have UNLV versus Boise State. Let's get it shaken. Let's see what's
Friday
going
night
on.
game, right?
I believe. Let me check that out for you real quick. We can do some quick research here. Do some quick research.
If that's a Friday night game, that is going to be.
That's a Friday night game, 9:30 p.m. CBS Sports Network.
Love it. That's going to be a much bigger stage than if they were buried at the end of the night or in the middle of the day on a regular slate. It's going to be a Friday night game. The entire country is going to be tuning in for that game. Yep. So it's going to be great, man. But talking about UNLV, Oregon State, I think this is going to be a proven game for Hotty Williams and that offense. I think they're primed. I think they're going to look good in this game. Oregon State is a solid team. It's hard to go to Corvallis and win. But, from what I've seen from Oregon State, they're not the horse of a team they've been the last couple seasons, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Their defense is still pretty solid. They gave Oregon some trouble for about 2.5 quarters there. We're able to keep them under wraps for the most part until Oregon exploded late. But I think UNLV has the guys to get it done. I'm looking at Ricky White, man. He's on a tear right now. Ricky White, if he can come out and have the type of ball game that I think he can have, I think UNLV is the team to be here. And I think the -7 line is pretty accurate. I think they'll be able to win by a touchdown or 10 points or so.
Yeah,
so
really.
UNLV,
like Oregon State's they're way worse than you even think.
Yeah,
they aren't any good. I mean, they lost to Nevada last time out, man. 42-37. They played a 2 OT game against Colorado State. And honestly, like, you just look at their quarterback right now, Giovanni McCoy. He wants to try to run the ball, get out of the pocket, do some things like that, but he can't throw the ball a lick. He had 4 picks against Nevada. I think that UNLV, their defense, the type of pressure they can put on you, they have good linebackers to get sideline to sideline. They have a really good free safety in Jalen Catalon who can come downhill and hit you. He can play sideline to sideline. I just don't see Oregon State offensively being able to do all that much. And I've seen this UNLV offense, take off with Hotty Williams. So I have high hopes for them this weekend. Another game that we could have gone to is Memphis versus North Texas, 2 5-1 teams, but it's the battle of the most unimpressive 5-1 records in the country. I think North Texas, the FBS teams they've beaten this year have a combined 7 wins. The FBS teams that Memphis has beaten have a combined 5 wins. So 5-1 versus 5-1, but not very impressive. All right, now let's get to our picks, lock, shock, and bonus. Let's start with our locks, and I have a feeling that I'm going to be, and I don't have a feeling, I know, we're going to be fading each other this week for the first time. I'm going to go with Oregon minus the 27.5 versus Purdue on Friday night. And the reason I say this is because everyone is going to pick and load up on Purdue because they're going to say, oh, you're coming off this emotional high and, you're going to get lost. It's a Friday night in West Lafayette. Dreams go to die in West Lafayette. They're going to do all that crap. But I think Oregon is hyper aware. Dan Lanning is hyper aware of the letdown spot. And Purdue is absolutely horrible. Don't get it twisted. That's one of my former coaches, Ryan Walters, coaching them. I hope he does well at some point. It's just not this year, and it's certainly not this game. I think Oregon lays one on them and wins by probably 5 scores.
That's a fair assessment. I think I'm going to go with Florida State Duke under 42.5. I just haven't seen enough from either one of these offenses to think they're going to explode. This could be the game, that they both come out and just have the best game of their season, right? It'll probably bite me in the butt, but I just haven't seen anything from either one of these offenses to be excited about it. I think that the over 42.5 is going to happen. I think both of the defenses are decent enough to where they can stifle these offenses, and we don't see any enough of a run game or sustained passing attack vertically from either of these teams. So I'm going to take that 42.5, and I like that under, especially because I think this is going to be a turnover-heavy game, and they're not going to be able to capitalize on those opportunities.
All right, I got you. Now let's go to shocks. I'm going to start here. I'm going to go Auburn plus 4.5 on the road against Mizzou. I just literally, this has nothing to do with me thinking Auburn's good. It's all to do with me thinking Mizzou is a very middling team, and they're not worthy of the top 25 at this point. Like, who has Mizzou beaten? That why?
Boston College is maybe their best win.
Okay, but Boston College isn't a ranked team anymore. Boston College, they freaking lost to Virginia last time they played. Like, I the reason I'm picking this, I think that Auburn can cover, could potentially win outright. I just don't think Mizzou's any good.
Yeah, I mean, I like Auburn's defense. Auburn's defense is much better than the team's record indicates, because they've been in every game they've played this season because of that defense. And you know what? Missouri is the type of team that if they're on their worst, their B game, C game, you can potentially see Auburn win that game. So I do like that pick. But I want to go Purdue plus 27.5. And I'm not going to do it because I think Purdue's a great team or because West Lafayette is where dreams go to die. I'm just following the track record of Oregon against the teams they played of that caliber. They didn't look great against Idaho. They didn't look great against Boise State. They didn't look great against UCLA. They found a way to pull away in UCLA and Oregon State games, but those games were very competitive for 2.5, 3 quarters. The UCLA game, UCLA had some opportunity to score there late to really bite into that lead. So if I'm just following the tea leaves there, I don't think they're going to be as up for this game. That's just football. That's the way it goes. They are extremely talented. They should be able to beat this team by more than 27.5. But I'm just following the leaves here. It's hard to go on the road and play well. I'm following the tea leaves with the Big Ten. There's some stat about teams that have traveled to time zones are like 1 in 10 or something crazy like that. So they're traveling to West Lafayette from Oregon. It's going to be a little bit more difficult game than people are giving the credit for. So I'm going to lean Purdue plus 27.5, even though I don't feel great about it.
All right, now my bonus this week, I'm going to go to Nebraska and Indiana over 50.5, because Indiana has scored 41, 42, 50 against anybody they play. Nebraska has a good defense, but they have not seen anything like Indiana's passing offense. And obviously Indiana's 3-0 in the Big Ten. They're 6-0 overall. I'm just going to go lines for Curtis Rourke in Big Ten play. 25 for 33 for 307 and 4 touchdowns versus UCLA. Then he plays Maryland and he goes 22 for 33, 359, 3 touchdowns against them. Then his last game out against Northwestern, he goes 25 for 33, 380 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. I just think it's going to be a really tough day for Nebraska's defense. They may get a couple of stops, but I think Indiana can put somewhere around 35 points on them. And I also believe that Nebraska with Dylan Raiola, they can get after Indiana's defense to a certain extent. I think that Indiana will win this game like 35, 28, something like that, but I think it gets over.
I like that. I was kind of on the borderline about this one, and you kind of convinced me with that. So I do like that pick, and I'm going to go under 49.5 for Notre Dame and Georgia Tech. Simply because of the way they both like to play. They're both run-heavy teams that want to bleed the clock, right? So I don't think there's going to be a ton of points scored in this game. I think it's going to be a defensive ball game. You're going to see Riley Leonard, a heavy dose of him running the ball. You're going to see Jamal Haynes in Georgia Tech, a heavy dose of him running the football. So I think the clock is going to be bled a lot in this game. It's going to be a game of possessions. Who has the most possessions? Who's able to capitalize the most? And I don't see a high-scoring game in this one at all. So under 49.5 for this one, and I think Notre Dame edges a close one in this ball game.
Kai, where they find you?
Find me on Twitter. Find me here at G5 Classified. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Find me on 92.9 with Gabe Kuhn every Thursday, baby. And I have a bunch of stuff coming out. I have some Oregon stuff. I've been doing a bunch of NFL stuff for Oregon and USC as well with Caleb Williams, Justin Herbert, and those guys. Then I got a Panay Sewell column coming out soon because I think he's stamped himself as the best right tackle in football. So check me out there. That's where you find all that stuff. And thank you guys for listening and watching again this week.
Yes, sir. Now you can find me at G_Coon71. If you're in Memphis, you can listen to me. And really, if you're not in Memphis, download the Odyssey app. You can hear me on 92.9 FM ESPN on Thursdays. I do have Kyron on at 6 o'clock if you want to catch that segment. But make sure you tune in to all this stuff. I also have a podcast on this same network that you can listen to every single Tuesday at noon. It's the On the Bluff podcast with Christian Fowler. But like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Go to bluffcitymedia.co. You can find all the podcasts and articles there. But we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of G5 Classified. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a rating and a review wherever you download your podcasts. To watch this episode, head over to the Bluff City Media YouTube channel. We'll see you back here next week.